welcome to Death Diaries episode 2 with Script K80. I'm Andy, this is Enleak. We're learning threat hunting by speaking to threat hunters.
Yep, we're on a journey to acquire as much information, ask the important questions in order to improve, hence the name Death Diaries. So, what's up, Katie? Give us an introduction and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Katie. I'm Script Katie, spelled Script K80 on most platforms. And I'm a former threat hunter. I'm currently a cloud engineer. And I got to this path based on the skills that I learned when I was in cybersecurity. I started as a cybersecurity analyst, then I was an ISSO, and then I became a threat hunter. And that was one of the most fun periods in my life and my professional journey. And so I'm excited to share and talk about it.
So I definitely want to get into why you stopped having fun in your life and pivoted out of threat hunting. But first of all, how did you get into cybersecurity itself?
Yeah, so like all other hackers, I wasn't showing up to school when I was in high school. I never would have gotten into any colleges. And so 2 weeks after I turned 18, I enlisted in the Army Reserves. I didn't want to commit to active duty, so I joined the reserves. And they said, what job do you want? I got a good ASVAB score, and they said you could take any job you want. And I said, which one has the longest school? And so I took a technical school. It wasn't quite a cyber series, but it was technical. It covered component level hardware, signals equipment, as well as like Cisco routers and switches, and also Linux and Windows servers. And then from there, I went straight into the workforce. I thought I was going to go to college, and I ended up finding my passion in cybersecurity when I met a group of ethical hobbyist hackers. And from there, I switched my Army job from this like signals IT MOS to a cyber MOS, a 17 series. And I volunteered to mobilize with my unit. And I spent 2 years doing that, volunteering, mobilizing to active duty with a cyber protection team and doing threat hunting with them.
Okay, that's fantastic. A lot of our former work bosses, colleagues were all
Military experience, yeah.
so we really miss of those people, and thank you for your service. What can you explain what an ISSO is?
Yeah, it's an information systems security officer. Depending on where you're at, they might have different functions. I would say probably uh, the most like overarching theme is information assurance. They may be giving approvals for changes, giving like the cybersecurity expertise and perspective. Many of them have like CISSP, you can think of those kinds of skills. Uh, and they might have like different authority depending on where they're at. When I was in ISSO, we spent a lot of time running automated vulnerability scans and chasing down the actual IT and networkers to actually implement fixes to vulnerabilities. And so I moved on from that pretty quickly, and I wanted to be more on a terminal, on keyboard, and not necessarily enforcing the rules and compliance.
Okay. So what made you, or you're saying that motivated you to get into threat hunting? Wanting to be more
Yeah,
technical?
so I knew that I wanted to be more hands-on keyboard, and like I said, that's what I was doing as a civilian, but I was simultaneously in the Army Reserves. At this point, I'd found out about the 17 series that are the cybersecurity MOSs, and when they said, hey, like we have a deployment coming up, some people are gonna get put on this roster, I immediately said, like you can
Sign me up,
like add
coach.
me to the list. Yeah.
Okay, that's
And so
fantastic.
that kind of accelerated my training and my learning.
Cool. So you went, did you had prior analyst experience to that, or was it within that you went from analyst and then pivoted all the way to threat hunter? And how was that pivot, right? What were the differences that you seen between those two roles and that transition?
Yeah, there was a huge difference, and at the time it was really, really great for the goals I was trying to achieve. So I was a cybersecurity analyst for about a year and a half, and then I became an ISSO. Those were at two different jobs, two different completely places, both within the public sector. And they weren't fulfilling because those roles were really, really restricted, and the tools that we had available to us and what we were doing. When I was a cybersecurity analyst, I wasn't working in a SOC. I was on a team of 3 people, and we were still just doing vulnerability scans. And we were trying to come up with things to do. So at that job, we would war drive the base to see if we found any like rogue signals.
Okay.
But we were just picking up all of the Wi-Fi signals from the dorms and the barracks. Another day, my boss said, "Hey, we're gonna go dumpster diving," and I said, "I don't know if you're allowed to make us do that."
No way.
But we did. We crawled in the dumpsters to see if people were throwing away sensitive materials. We would tear open trash bags, and I would say, "There's no sensitive materials in here." Like, if we ever do this again, I am like gonna leave. It was a really weird job. A lot of cybersecurity you'll find is like managers like really trying to like come up with like creative ways to like be secure, and like always feeling like they're almost gonna like catch the bad guy if you like look in this weird odd place, and getting distracted by those little like whims. But when I became a threat hunter, we had a mission. We had like very kind of not clear goals, but we knew that we needed to take it seriously, and we didn't have time for like things like dumpster diving and running vulnerability scans. It was much more serious. It felt a little more dire. You have to be very active in your hunt, which I guess we'll probably get to here in a minute of what that actually looks like. But yeah, it felt a lot more serious and also taxing. You have to learn a lot quickly and keep up and study, so you never stop learning.
Okay.
Okay, so now you spoke a little bit about your SOC background and transitioning into threat hunting, right? So,
She said she didn't work in the SOC.
well, okay, her analyst. Oh, okay, fucking cut this then. Fuck.
Yeah, we're cutting it. I got the next question. So,
Yeah.
the title is "THRUNTING with K80." Why do people in the industry seem to hate that term?
You might have to cut this down a bit. I don't know, maybe because if you want to get into like phonetics and psychology, it kind of sounds like maybe like too close to cunt. Even when I told when I told my friends earlier that we were doing this segment, he literally said it's giving thrunt, and I was like, I'm gonna make that into a sticker for DEF CON because it sounds so stupid. Thrunting? I don't know.
It just sounds stupid, so everyone hates it. Like, that's it.
Do you think it doesn't sound stupid? Now I'm interviewing you.
I like how it sounds. That's why I'm titling the episode that.
Yeah.
Roger?
So, okay, so with your analyst background, right, we know that analysts in IR are a lot more reactive. We're waiting for cases and alerts to pop up, right? We're waiting for our tools to give us those signals. And then you moved to threat hunting, which is a lot more human-centric. It's a lot more proactive. You form the hypothesis. You're the one that's, gathering CTI reports or seeing what your pen testers are doing and, proactively looking at those logs, trying to find activity. How did you transition to that? How was that? Was there a skill you had to learn? Were you taught those skills? Did you have to go out and research it on your own? Because that's kind of what we're doing. So just trying to gain some insight on how you started threat hunting effectively.
Yeah, so on the threat hunting team that I was on, because it was a mobilization where people were either called to duty or volunteered, we all come from different backgrounds. We had people that really carried us. We had a Splunk architect, and he carried a lot because at the time, that was the license that we had. I had my ISSO background, which is more like compliance and stuff, and I was like learning how to write queries. But I have this background in dashboarding, so I could like come up with analytics and then kind of reverse engineer like the queries that we need to like extract that information out of the data. And then we have people that are networkers, and so it ended up being like working out really well because you need to have a well-rounded team in order to do that. Another thing that I thought was like kind of funny, because nobody knows every single part of it. No one knows every tactic. No one knows like all of the query languages. Like every single person brings something to the table, and if you're motivated, you'll succeed. even if you could be the smartest person, but if you're not motivated to figure something out, it's going to be really, really apparent.
Yeah.
And that's something that I really like about cybersecurity is how like motivated the community is. But something interesting that I found on my team where sometimes we would get people from combat MOSs and like tactical MOSs, we would get a ranger and they'd say, I need skills that'll translate into the real world. And I'm really worried about doing this because this seems like really hard and I know nothing about computers, much less this like really competitive MOS that's, built all these like engineers and stuff. But they would be so incredibly good at the job because they have this like tactical mindset of like anticipating like what the adversary is going to do, and they have that that ability to make connections and say, well, if they're doing something here, then they may need to like obfuscate their activity, or they may also want to like go after like particularly sensitive data. So even though they don't know the terminology, they kind of like know the cyber battlefield looks a lot like the tactile, like kinetic, like warfare, like battlefield. And so even though we have people on the team, they're like your typical like nerdy gamer types, and maybe they know some programming and they're super, super smart. Sometimes they weren't the best analysts because they weren't thinking with the big picture and making those connections and thinking about the adversary. They were thinking about how to write a really long, complicated query that didn't extract useful information.
Okay. So do you think then that it is really important to consume those CTI reports? I mean, I think the grim reality is that a lot of companies don't have their own CTI teams, right? So you as a threat hunter potentially have to be, wear many hats and also be that CTI analyst. How important is that? Is that like, most important or yeah, what is your opinion on that?
Yeah, so when you say CTI, can you like specify?
Yeah, so we know that these reports usually list, TTPs or IOCs that are important, right? And if it's specific to your environment, I think that you want to go potentially search for these things. And I guess not every company has the resources to have, those automated feeds that, you can just read from. I guess what I'm asking is, how important is CTI for hunting? Did you use any CTI sources, or was it mostly like what fueled your hunts?
Yeah, basically? I think the question is what originated the hypothesis? What fed into you starting a threat hunt?
Yeah, I meant, are you talking about like cyber threat intelligence?
Yeah.
When you say CTI?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so every single hunt is completely different. And that's a really important like first step that if you kind of gloss over it, you're going to have a really hard time hunting. And I know that because we oftentimes glossed over that part and had a really hard time hunting. Because we're just like this ragtag team of random people that got together and are trying to create a functional team and make sure that adversaries aren't slipping through the cracks. And so the short answer is it depends. If you're given a company and they say, hey, we need to like passively threat hunt, we don't even know what we're looking for, but we want to make sure that there's no activity on our networks that's bypassing our detections, then you would say, okay, what's happening in the world? What's your critical infrastructure? Like what kind of data do you have that like an adversary might want? So you kind of start there. And one thing that I think is really, really awesome that a client might be open to is doing sort of like a vulnerability assessment, like a mapping of their environment. If you can like have time to do that before, engaging in threat hunting, where you can do like a catalog of their assets, you can map their network, you can make sure that they're ingesting data from all of like, the sensors are set up in a way that's like capturing all of the net flow, identifying like key and critical infrastructure and systems, identifying their sensitive data. That makes it way easier. But a lot of companies don't have that, and a lot of organizations, aren't prepared to do that. And it also depends on the urgency. If something happens in the world, at the time when I was a threat hunter, Russia invaded Ukraine, and we said Russia's behaving really erratically. We don't know what they're going to do next. We need to make sure they're not ramping up cyber operations against the US. And so we reoriented and say, what might Russia do? And we completely shifted from what we were doing that was more passive, looking across, these big data sets, to like very focused, Russian APT activity, and specifically in the context of like the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. You also have threat hunts with like ICS missions where you have, you know, industrial infrastructure, and that's going to have like a different threat model entirely, and you can usually like drill down and hunt according to those TTPs, and you can pretty much create a really great like run book and plan according to completely open source feeds to you don't need tippers from the NSA and all this like insider information. Like for most threat hunts, paying attention to what's going on in the world, knowing who the adversary is, and knowing your own systems is going to go a long way.
So I think what you explained was gaining security context by doing a vulnerability assessment, looking at the asset inventory. You mentioned that sometimes you're dropped into environments where there's no tools, there's not a lot of knowledge. You're just kind of given a task and told to do it. How do you manage those situations?
As best as we can. And that's kind of where the motivation comes in. It's not a regular job where you can show up and you're going to get a training book and then you sit there and push buttons until 5 o'clock and you clock out. Like, if you're given tools and, you need to, like, learn some regex, or, like, you need to, God forbid, learn, like, about data pipelines and all of the steps that data goes through to make sure that you're getting something useful. Because sometimes you might be responsible for, like, setting up those sensors, or duplicating the traffic on a span port. Like, because you never know, you can't ever be over-prepared. It's really difficult to be prepared for every hunt. And so you show up. Hopefully you have some like a checklist of things that you're gonna need to know or want to know, things that would be nice to have when you get started. A lot of teams, I think, probably show up and they have like dashboards prepared. The team I was on, we didn't really ever have, we didn't get that far because we were a 2-year-old team. We were one of the very first teams to like set out to do this on active duty. And so we didn't have anyone that came through before us, and they had analytics to hand off and queries. And sometimes you're on a team and your organization says, okay, this license is expiring and we think we're going to go with, we have Splunk and we don't want to renew these licenses because they're expensive. And so we're going to start using Kibana. And so now you have to like redo everything you have, and you have to be prepared for those situations. And so your stamina like will show, and like your adaptability will show really quickly.
So you mentioned that your team was 2 years old. I recently learned that being good at threat hunting doesn't necessarily correlate with how many years of experience you have in threat hunting, because threat hunting is heavily influenced by confirmation bias. Like a threat hunter with 8 years of experience that has confirmation bias will be worse than a threat hunter who's fresh and has the right methodologies and is doing the right job. What do you think of that?
I think that it's hard to say like how you can like measure your like success as a threat hunter, because oftentimes you won't find anything. And you can either, there's like a lot of different ways to look at that too. Are you not finding something because like this environment's very secure and it's very like impenetrable and there is no malicious activity, or are you like failing in your detections?
Mentally,
you'll
how do you
never
deal with
know.
that? Like, you just did 8 hours of work for nothing, it seems like. How do you cope with that?
So that's actually like a kind of a common theme in threat hunting, is having to remind yourself that if you are trying your best and you're working hard and you're trying different things, if you don't find something here, you're pivoting to something else, and you're using intelligence focused analytics to conduct your hunt, it's never for nothing. Oftentimes you don't end up finding adversarial activity. You may not find the APT, but you find users, that are like executing tasks with elevated privileges that might be against the organization's policy. And that's not a for nothing finding. You find anomalous activity in protocols that are behaving weirdly, or ports that are listening maybe that shouldn't be, and it kind of ends up turning into like an accidental vulnerability assessment sometimes. And it is important to not get too focused on those things and like lose track of your mission to find adversarial activity. But you do find things like that often, more often hopefully, than the APTs and Russia and China. If you're finding lots of malicious activity, then I think that the organization's priority maybe shouldn't be threat hunting, and it should be, beefing up their policies and things like that. Because the nature of threat hunting is that it's a defensive operation. It's a mechanism of cyber defense. It's not as like reactive as incident response, and pen testing by its nature is, offensive and very active. And threat hunting is meant to, even though you're hunting with the assumption that the adversary has gained or compromised a system within your environment, that's more of like a simulated assumption. Hopefully this hasn't happened yet, and this is a defensive operation, and you are just going to find, minor anomalous things and potentially like breaches of policy by employees, but nothing hopefully too significant.
Oh, cool.
So on the topic of anomalous activities, right, whether they're small or an APT, how important do you think is learning the query language? And the only reason I'm asking this is because I've been stressing, right? We pivot to so many different tools, and right now I'm trying to really master CQL, right? Falcon's query language for CrowdStrike. And I'm stressing because, to be an effective threat hunter, ideally, the query language to a decent level. So how important do you think it is for anyone else, stressing about the same thing that I am, to learn the language?
So it's one of those things, certainly, that takes practice and time and exposure. I'll say that it's not a blocker to being a threat hunter, but learning it and gaining ownership of it will make your life a lot easier. And it'll be really satisfying too. I mean, I remember like when I finally wrote like a query that was like 2 or 3 lines long, and I was like, this thing's like incredible. This has got to be one of the best like queries ever written. And then our Splunk architect comes through with like a whole code block, and I like can't even like believe that like the field would even take that many characters. And so I think it's probably more of it's a marathon, not a sprint. But the more practice you can get, and the less you shy away from, trying to like drill down on like specific bits of information, especially with huge data sets, you're going to really need to like be specific with what you're looking for. And sometimes you might be limited by like, the computational power of your resources, and you can't just, use these like big, broad queries.
You're welcome.
It just literally might not even work. So all I can say is don't give up, because it looks really, really cool when you can deliver one of those big queries to one of your junior analysts one day, and they're going to be like, they're going to ask you that question.
Yeah. Cool. So another thing that Andy and I discussed while studying was how potentially counterintuitive it might be to have a Confluence full of just queries where, like, let's say you want to look for DNS activity. You have a page in Confluence or a table listing the query to find DNS activity, right? To find files that were written to disk. So you just have a big table full of queries to look for activity. Eventually, that table becomes huge, right? It's not useful. How do you go about learning the infrastructure, right? Do you talk to people? Do you expect for there to be network diagrams? Do you create tables full of queries with 120 entries that you have to control F to find? I'm not sure exactly what's the most effective. So it'd be cool to hear your insight.
Now, I can't say what, the Microsofts of the world are doing, and IBM. I'm sure they have a really awesome system for, cataloging their analytics. we had like that like Confluence page, and we did, like just try and like come up with as many as we could that would translate from hunt to hunt. Now, I will say that there are some, DNS is like a really great toolbox to like have that you can carry from hunt to hunt, because it's very commonly, exploited for, either, DDoS detections, or like probably more important for threat hunting for, data exfiltration. And so that probably comes with experience, is knowing what you're going to be looking for most common, so that you aren't having to recreate your toolbox every single time you are introduced to a new environment or a new data set. That might be something that you grow into, because you just might end up having this whole long list of analytics that are useful to you. You might even just have like a list of like really awesome queries that give you a really cool output, and you don't want to forget it, and you're going to have to like control F for like that really cool query that gave you this perfect table, or like a graph or a visualization. And that ends up kind of just being the reality of threat hunting. And probably a lot of like cybersecurity in general is like figuring out a way to keep track of the things that you've done before that you may have seen once, but it'll be useful one day when you're in a similar environment with similar data sets, or, so you might get NetFlow logs on a hunt from AWS, and in another hunt you'll have, Zeek logs for like your firewall logs, and then, you might have to like rewrite something based on like that. So if you can come up with something that's like generic, that's great. If you like take the time to generalize your queries, and even like having like I think organizing based on dashboards is like a great way to do that, instead of like having this like linear endless list, having like categories of, when we come into this environment, this is our like admin activity dashboard. We're tracking every like command, every Windows event, things that administrative privileges are executing anywhere. And then another one might be just like web traffic. These are the top domains. These are, the websites that are like being reached out to like most commonly to like look for patterns. And then you'll have your DNS dashboard, and that's going to be like the packet sizes. That's going to be like looking for subdomains and things like that. So, and I think a lot of teams probably do carry like dashboards with them, depending on, I don't know what tools allow you to like save a dashboard and like transport it to like another application. I want to say like Kibana allows you to like export dashboards into other environments, but that might be like something that you end up doing.
I'm super curious what working in a threat hunting team is like. I assume you have a team lead, and then people specialize in different things, but if you could tell us like what is the dynamic of a threat hunting team like?
Yeah, so generally in the beginning you do have team leads. You might have like a senior that's been there the longest, or someone that's been identified as like highly skilled, and they may lead the hunt in like delegating tasks, from the beginning. If it's a new environment, which is mostly what I'm used to, is working with people I've never worked with before. But you end up delegating tasks, hopefully based on people's strong suits. Because there are like phases of a threat hunt, sometimes you end up branching off into like different tasks. So if you have a persistent hunt, you are looking for, let's say you have a data set that may contain, like that's an environment that contains like sensitive data, and that China might be particularly interested in the sensitive data that's contained within this environment. You may be conducting a hunt based on a set of TTPs that you worked with your team lead on, and they said, hey, this is what our threat model is. This is, I've talked to the owners of the environment and the stakeholders and all these people that really are like the administrators that can give you that information, because you really can't infer what like the critical infrastructure is. You have to work with like the systems owners to get that, and usually they don't know what that is either. So your team lead might be the person that explains that to them, and you work through that together, and then they come back and they give that information to the team, and they say, we need to divide up this information because it's a huge data set, and if we all go looking at it at the same time, we're going to duplicate our work and no one's going to find anything. So if you have your dashboard set up, It might be, hey, like, take a look at the dashboards. You keep an eye on this. You keep an eye on that. If someone has a strong suit, they'll probably, like, take over maybe a certain, like, enclave and hunt based on something that they know really well. Hopefully you, like, fall into a good, like, rhythm with your coworkers. And one of the most important things in threat hunting is communicating, like, throughout the whole process, throwing things out there and saying, hey, I'm stuck, or I'm not finding anything, or my queries aren't returning what I thought they would. We would go sometimes, like, hours, maybe even days without, like, syncing up and knowing what the other person is, like, getting, if they've gotten anything, if they're having a hard time. And you have to, I think that's also, like, the team lead's job is to kind of be a people manager. And if you can, like, help them do that, that's, like, a really, like, good way to, like, make yourself stand out as someone with leadership qualities, because it's hard to be a team lead in cybersecurity, because not only do you need to, like, have the technical know-how, but being a people lead is hard, especially with when you have lots of skilled people that are, like, maybe used to being very independent and working independently. But I think that delegating, and then if you have a hunt and you get a tipper, someone says, hey, I'm seeing something weird, this might be related to what you're doing, can you have some people look into this? The team lead's going to say, hey, if we have a team of 6 people, you 4 are going to keep doing what we're doing, continue the hunt, maybe, like, get the notes from these other 2 people, but these 2 people are going to look into this for a period of time, and we're going to, like, dedicate 2 days to that to see if it, like, manifests into anything. And then also knowing when to stop the hunt or when to move on from something is,
how do you know that?
is tough. I think that those are some things that need to be laid out from the beginning. If you go into a hunt with no clear scope, no deadlines, no deliverable, you will hunt forever, especially if you have a really large data set or the organization is very large. It never ends. Yeah. And that's something that, like, we struggled with, and we had to, like, figure out how to, like, scope the hunt, because we would just be given the whole, basically, like, all of the traffic being passed within the whole organization and say, let's try to find something. It would never end. And that gets, like, really miserable, and you burn out really, really quickly. And then it makes it hard to, like, restart another hunt because you never, like, resolved what you were working on. So that's probably also something that, like, should be laid out from the beginning, and also why it's important to maybe have, like, some analytics in mind, so that you can try and, like, capture some, like, some quick wins and things that you've checked, having a checklist. It's good.
Let's say you're hired to lead a threat hunting team, and you want to create your dream team. Like, what sort of qualifications, backgrounds do you want to see in the team members? What sort of, like, skill sets do you want to see them leading with?
Well, that's a bit of a tough question, because when you go into these things, you're never thinking about, like, what do you want other people to have? You're worried if, like, you are ready yourself. So I would say a really, really underrated, part of cybersecurity, something you don't really see in, like, other disciplines like networking and engineering, is, like, a really, like, wide variety and, like, diversity and, like, skills and backgrounds. Threat hunting is a discipline where you get to, like, apply, like, a creative part of your brain, and you're not just, like, following a formula. Like, there are methodologies and matrices that, like, can help, like, guide you in a hunt so that you can, be productive and extract meaningful information out of your tools. But at the end of the day, like, you're looking for, like, human activity. You're looking for variable activity. You're looking for people that are going to try to trick you and trick your systems, and you need to be able to put yourself in their shoes. So not only is having, like, strong offensive security skills, like, a huge bonus, because you know what they might be doing and you know how the protocols work, but also being able to, like, look at traffic and know what the traffic means, like, understanding packet headers and what's in a packet header, so that you're not, like, learning on the job. Are
you talking about
like,
Wireshark logs?
Sorry?
Are you talking about Wireshark logs?
It could be Wireshark. It's there's different types of like, data that you could be looking for. Most commonly with a threat hunt, you're looking at network activity, and that's usually like a packet capture. Sometimes you might just have NetFlow logs for like a segment of the network, and that's just going to be header information. But if you have a full packet capture, hopefully that's what you have. Then it's like, yeah, it's understanding like, the hops of a network. It's understanding like the contents of a packet. It's understanding how protocols are supposed to behave. Those things are standardized and regulated by like, organizations. I think it's the RFC. And so that like helps a lot in a hunt because you kind of know like you have this baseline of expected behavior from certain protocols, but adversaries, they're paid to try and like trick you and trick the system and make information and data look legitimate. And so being willing to not only like use the part of your brain that's like been like beefed up and studied for the query languages and the protocol information, but using that like creative side. So with that in mind, it just helps to have people from all different backgrounds. You could have a network engineer that doesn't even have a cybersecurity background, but they know packets and they know NetFlow.
Yeah.
And that's going to help because a network engineer can figure out how to write a query.
Yeah.
That kind of goes back to what I was saying about, when we would get people from tactical backgrounds and they would be really, really worried that they can't do the job. And they would be like from day one, like very insecure about their skills. And then by like week 2, they're like working one-on-one with the team lead to discuss like, adversarial tactics because they speak the language, and it's like kind of a social skill as well as like hard technical skills.
Talking about social skills, I've been given a particular suggestion to set up calls with everyone at SecOps and just introduce myself and talk with them because as a threat hunter now, you want to know everyone's capabilities, what they're working on, who they are. Is that something you had to do? Because like, I'm not sure if I want to bother everyone and be like, hey, nice to meet you guys. What do you guys work on? So is that something you had to do, or was that, did you just work with your team members? How did that look?
Well, we were mobilized, like we were in the Army. We were as close as we ever like wanted to be. You don't like get a closer team than that, and so we had that was kind of like forced upon us already.
Oh.
That's probably not common. Different teams definitely have different cultures and ways that they like to operate. When I was with AWS, I wasn't a threat hunter. I was with like cloud support engineering, and they have a really, really big culture of if you have a question, you can search the entire Slack. Every like channel that's ever been made public. You could look for book clubs even, and and like weekend. You could find a dog sitter on AWS Slack. But you could also find people that would engage in discussions about a really particular issue that you might have been having with, the EC2 service. And you're very much encouraged to reach out to any person that works at AWS that might have your answer, and they would answer, immediately. And they would get on a call and they would help you with your issue. And that's the AWS culture is, you're all on the same team. You should pretty much like feel like you're already, almost like acquainted and friends just by like the proximity of being at the same company and within the same organization. And that was something that I really liked about AWS. Every company that I've been at since it's not like that. You work within the confines of your team, and if you need something from someone else, there's maybe not any way to contact them. It's difficult to reach people. That's something that we saw a lot when I was a threat hunter. We were threat hunting, within the public sector. We are all, paid by the federal government. It's, the same pool of money, essentially, in my eyes. We're all in the same team. Mm-hmm. But if there's someone at a site and you're saying, hey, this site kind of seems like a black box. I'm not getting, like, either good data from this site, or it seems like there's a whole, like, section of, like a whole segment of IP ranges that are missing from the data. And we think that there might be a sensor that's not working or that was improperly placed. There's no one to reach there. And even if you do reach someone, they may not want to help you. And you need to like be comfortable. Maybe they want you to just be comfortable reaching out to people, but being overly friendly has gotten me really far, and it's gotten me information that I needed quickly.
Okay.
Often. I don't know if that like works for everyone, but I think that there's probably a reason, maybe, why they encourage you to do that.
Yeah.
So be friendly, introduce yourself, talk to
Yeah.
people.
I think we embody that, or try to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to ask now, those threat hunting skills, did they translate to any other jobs that you worked since? Do you carry those skills? Because, we don't know what's after, threat hunting, but we definitely want to, develop these skills and hopefully still be able to use them in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd like to think that threat hunting could probably translate to just about any technical, engineering job possible, because you're analyzing, network traffic. You may even end up like, analyzing and doing forensic work on, endpoints and systems.
Yeah.
And I actually got hired by AWS directly from those mobilizations where I was doing the threat hunting, and I was hired to the EC2 Linux team because I just had these like these skills with like Linux processes and command line experience that they, I guess, were looking for EC2 Linux. And so I had never been a cloud engineer before that, or a network engineer, and I didn't really struggle at that job because those skills translated so well. As a threat hunter, when you're studying and you're practicing, you're not like going home and doing a hunt. You're going home and you're probably like hacking and building and like learning about protocols and like systems and how they work. So it's not like you build this like foundation of skills that aren't necessarily like threat hunting skills. You're kind of just learning about how computers work so that you can like hunt for anomalies. So that you can like tell the difference between something behaving correctly and behaving erroneously. And that's exactly what engineering is. You're trying to set up an infrastructure that it's redundant, it's safe, it's secure, it's stable, it's highly available. And so if you can be a person that's good at security, you're going to be an excellent engineer, because a lot of times people, learn engineering skills and they may not have, that like baseline cybersecurity knowledge to know all of the ways that something can go wrong. When you've seen it, like you've seen the aftermath of, an attack, or like, like what versions of softwares are vulnerable, or like the impact that, a vulnerability can have on an organization. So you're kind of thinking of that as you're building, and you end up with, very highly available and secure systems as a builder. And so, yeah, I would like to think that if you can do threat hunting, you could do anything.
Cool. So would you go back to threat hunting work? Are you still interested in that type of work, or have you like fully moved on from that at this point?
Well, I really want to go back to cybersecurity. Currently, even though I'm a cloud engineer, I'm a subcontractor with an engineering project, but the company that I actually work for is like a cybersecurity consulting company primarily, and I chose this company specifically because they know that I want to work with the rest of the team. I want to like be able to still do white papers and stuff on the side, and eventually one day when I get tired of this, instead of having to leave for another organization, I can stay here and I can go like do the pen testing stuff and the cyber analyst stuff. And so I definitely like think about going back all the time. I think that the threat hunting was really, it was fulfilling and it was fun. Sometimes it almost feels like a game.
Yeah.
Versus the engineering side, you get a lot more like quick gratification. With threat hunting, there's not a whole lot of gratification. You don't really always catch the bad guy, and it can be a bit like exhausting. And it's important to like, take time for yourself and reset when you need to, so that you can like be your best. Versus with engineering, you're given a task, you build something, and then now you get to like see like people enjoy it.
Yeah.
So there's like pros and cons to both. I miss cybersecurity all the time. Also, like there's such a steep skill curve in like cybersecurity disciplines, and like such a high ceiling in cyber. And so even though on the engineering side I consider myself like mid to senior depending on the team, if I went back to cybersecurity, even though at the time like I was like very comfortable on my team and I felt really like secure with the tools, I'm sure I would be a junior on any team, any like mature team. because there's so many like so much talent like on that side.
Yeah.
Not to say there's no talent, you know, in engineering, but some the solutions, you know, so straightforward. Sometimes a little less room for creativity.
If you had to go back a couple years and you're starting threat hunting again, what advice would you give yourself and give us right now?
I would have liked to develop a specialty. I think that what I was doing was getting a bit overwhelmed with how much information is out there, all the different types of hunts you can be conducting, and all the different protocols and softwares and APTs and activities. And I think that if I would have like really tried to like gain ownership over like, you know, specialize with like a particular type of attack or like particular like type of environment and really like drill down on it and become an expert, I might have like been more comfortable with my skills, and I might have like felt a little bit maybe less overwhelmed. Maybe I would have maybe like burnt out less, you know, when you're jumping from thing to thing every day, and every week you feel like you have to learn a new skill when you really like didn't fully gain ownership over the last one you were just practicing. Then your brain gets a little bit scattered and you get a little bit tired, and then you also forget things easily.
What does burnout
more
mean
easily
to you?
when you try and study that way?
Like, how does burnout feel for you?
Sometimes you don't even realize that you've burnt out until like it's like too late, you know, you're already like sleeping in past like a deadline, or you've already like completely given up on a goal that you thought you were going to reach. You know, those days that it's like hard to even like get yourself to open your laptop, and you've like changed your routine. Maybe you were like waking up and like, you know, you were in your grind set until, you know, you fall asleep at the end of the night. And then you find yourself like not even being able to like sit down for an hour or two. By then usually like you're too tired to even like correct, you know, the behavior, correct the schedule. And I think I've gotten better at realizing when I'm going down a path that is not going to be sustainable, and giving myself more achievable goals and more achievable, you know, study ambitions, and breaking things up into chunks instead of working on a lot of things in parallel, giving myself, you know, only 2 or 3 things to work on at a time, and then I can start something else, and forcing myself to do that.
Were there any times where when you were hunting that you had to deal with imposter syndrome? I feel like because I've been given the task of starting the threat hunting program, I'm kind of freaking out a little bit, if I'm being, you know, candid. I think like I'm being, you know, I'm used to looking at logs and reacting, and now it's like, hey, Rich, you start the threat hunting program. And I'm like, oh, crap, I don't know if I have this skill set yet. Is there any times where you had to, you know, you had that same, I guess, mentality, and how did you, you know, this is for us too, because we're being given this task of, you know, doing threat hunting with no prior experience, and I'm sure that imposter syndrome is going to start sneaking in slowly. So we want to tackle that before it gets bad and we start giving up on life.
Yeah.
I love talking about imposter syndrome because I think it's like the most like thrown around like buzzwordy psychology word ever. And I have like this whole rant on imposter syndrome, that if you believe you have imposter syndrome, then you've already like disqualified yourself from having it, because like that's not how that works.
Yeah.
But I am a big believer in like indomitable confidence. Mostly because if someone's asking you to do something, you already know that they don't know how to do it. And if you do anything at all that's like impactful and meaningful, you've probably already exceeded their expectations. Like, that's like, especially when someone says, hey, we don't have this capability at all, can you like put something together from scratch? Like, that's like the most like fun opportunity. It's gonna be stressful, and like if you're not stressed about it, then you're probably not like worried enough, you know? So like if you can like use like the anxiety of it and like, you know, the pressure to really like deliver, you'll probably over deliver, you know? They don't even know exactly what they want or what they need, and it's an opportunity for you to say, this is what I can do for you, but like we could also do this, this, and this. um, and they just, it's so much easier to deliver something that's as best as you can and have someone in like leadership and management, you know, refine it and say, yes, keep this. No, we can't do that. Let's change this. And then you've just made someone else's job a lot easier, and they're probably not like expecting, you know, a fully functional, you know, an efficient threat hunting operation. But the reality is a lot of people don't know where to start. And like I said, like, and you might have heard this from other people that you've talked to, it's definitely like true for me that when we started, I mean, when I got assigned to that threat hunting team with all these people from different backgrounds, I was probably 22, and I thought, man, I'm not going to know like anything about this. And then I got there, and all these people that had 20 plus years of experience, they were also like, man, I don't know how to do this. And, you know, like what they say about, like interviews, this is only, you know, indirectly related, but one of my first mentors, he's on the IBM's incident response team,
X-Force?
IBM's X-Force. Yeah, he's at IBM's X-Force. I was a little bit nervous about like my AWS interviews, and he was like, listen, like, if someone has like extended this interview to you, meaning if someone has also extended this opportunity to you to like set up a new team, what they're looking for is like 20% if you can do it, and like 80% if you're like cool to work with.
Yeah.
Because like they know your skills, you know, they know that you can probably deliver. It's like an opportunity to like show what you can do. But really, one of like a skill that a lot of people have a hard time learning after they get into cybersecurity is how to be cool and how to like work well with other people.
Yes, so
and how to
much
like how to like organize and you know, produce something that's actually useful and not like something well thought out. So,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
also like, you know, peer reviews goes a long way. If you're like starting on something and you want to see if you're on the right track, just put something together, put anything together, you know, one single task or one single, you know, mission or goal, and then get a peer review and say, what do you think about this? Like, should I keep going down this way, or should I do more of this or more of that? And that'll make it easier. You know, don't let yourself work in a vacuum.
Okay, cool. You seem like you're strongly opinionated about being cool and yourself in cyber.
Yeah, I think everyone should be themselves. I think I've had people that aren't technically that advanced, but you know, I know I can work with them. I know together, like on a call, we can figure it out. And then I know people that are extremely technically skilled, but just talking to them is a pain that I don't even want to approach the subject of working with them. And it's a night and day difference, because at the end of the day, like, I'm more productive with the person that I can sit together on a call and figure it out. But okay.
Yeah, no, that's a real thing. You know, people that like drag down a team, it's already a job that can get really, really exhausting. You should like find friends in your coworkers. Like you should like be able to talk to people and bounce ideas and like get like sanity checks, and it shouldn't be like high pressure. Yeah, you really, if you think that you're struggling with something, I'm sure everyone on your team is struggling just as much. And if someone isn't struggling, then they've been where you are and they're probably willing to help. And if they're not, then, you know, that's a them problem.
All right, I'm gonna pause real quick. I think it's kind of off topic at this point. So
Yeah.
do you wanna throw like some wrap up questions?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah, just ask if there's anything that she wants to share, her social media and stuff. And yeah.
okay. Is there like any last threat hunting questions?
No, I think like I'm starting to understand that, you know, a lot of it's also like just like research. Like we have to get to the keyboards one day.
Yeah.
You know, we can't just keep all this information in our head. So
Okay.
It's gonna atrophy.
yeah.
I wasn't even sure like how many questions I'd be able to answer, because I would not be able to like show up to like that team today and like get started.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to ask the last question?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, in order to wrap this up, we just wanted to you know, ask for you to share any of your socials, anything that, you know, you're particularly working on that you want to share. Just give you this time to share any of your stuff.
You can find me on social media, the same handle, K80, Twitter, Instagram, and hopefully soon I'll be streaming on Twitch more often, and maybe even expanding from there. But there will definitely be more content to come. A lot of content focused on more of what I'm doing now as a cloud engineer, building solutions, architectures, a lot of well-architected framework and zero trust. And so definitely like look out for any of that stuff upcoming. But I'm always working on projects with my friends, hardware, game dev, art. And so, I love interacting with people and collaborating. So I'm glad that you invited me, and I can't wait to see what you guys do in your endeavors. You always end up on paths that maybe you weren't expecting. So
Yeah,
definitely keep
definitely.
going.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.